In today's video, we will be ranking every Super Bowl since 2010 based on entertainment value, ranging on a scale from total snooze fest to the all-time classics. Now, warning, this is my subjective opinion. Feel free to comment your rankings for these games down below. 2010. The Saints and the Colts faced off in Super Bowl 44. This was a matchup meant to be, after both teams dominated the regular season, with the Saints starting 13-0 and the Colts 14-0. Peyton Manning had yet another great season and was looking to get his second Super Bowl. Meanwhile, Drew Brees helped resurrect a snake-bitten franchise that had never even been to a Super Bowl. The game got off to a slow start, with the Colts scoring the only touchdown of the first half. The biggest moment in the first half was a clutch goal line stand by Indy with less than 2 minutes to go. But the Saints did end up salvaging a field goal with their following drive. Then, the big shocker. A surprise onside kick helped flip the momentum to start the second half, which led to the Saints' first touchdown. The game began to pick up at this point as the Colts answered with a nice touchdown drive to take back the lead. After a pair of field goals, Brees orchestrated a fourth quarter touchdown drive with a crazy 2-point conversion to take the lead with less than 6 minutes to go. Then, minutes later, the most famous moment from this game happened when Tracy Porter picked off Peyton Manning and took it to the house. This sealed the game.
I think I'm going to put this one in B tier. As far as entertainment value, this game started a little slow, but it remained close, had some twists and turns, and was an overall solid watch. Tracy Porter proved the importance of clutch defense, which is kind of like the role AG1, today's video sponsor, can play in supporting your immune defense. When AG1 reached out for a sponsorship, I was thrilled because this is a product I have enjoyed over the years and completely stand by. Personally, I like to start each and every morning drinking AG1. As someone who enjoys working out regularly and always looking to improve my health and daily routine, I bought pretty quickly into what AG1 was offering. AG1 is a foundational nutritional supplement that supports whole body health. I've noticed my digestion has improved, as well as I've suffered less bloating, and I feel much more focused throughout the day, whether I'm working on a video or working out. We are all creatures of habit, and when setting intentions, consistency is key. And the process of taking AG1 is so effortless. You just fill your shaker with water, add in 1 scoop of AG1, shake, and there you go. The taste is pleasant. It's mellow with a slight hint of pineapple, so it's rather enjoyable. And they even offer travel packs for when you're on the go. So if you're like me and want to build a solid nutritional habit, use the link in my description or scan the QR code to subscribe and save $20 off your first subscription of AG1.
2011. The Steelers and Packers matched up in Super Bowl 45. This was Pittsburgh's return to the big game after winning it 2 years prior. And this was also the rise of Aaron Rodgers, who had made his first Pro Bowl the previous year, but had not won a playoff game until 2011, where he had led this amazing run from the wild card to make it to his first Super Bowl. The Packers stormed out to a 21-3 lead late in the second quarter, and this was off the back of 2 brutal Big Ben interceptions. The story of the first half came down to Packers' dominance and critical injuries to Emmanuel Sanders, Donald Driver, and Charles Woodson. On the brink of being blown out, Pittsburgh answered with a crucial touchdown right before halftime. After about as good of a first half as you could play, the Packers began to make some mistakes. There was that brutal drop by James Jones that eventually led to another Steelers touchdown. And then the Packers punted on back-to-back possessions, essentially opening the door for the Steelers to come back. But first, they missed a field goal, and then in a critical moment, Rashard Mendenhall fumbled, which led to a Packers touchdown. And then just when you thought the Steelers were down and out, they went right down the field, scored a touchdown, and converted the 2-point try to bring it within 3. Despite Rodgers continuing to deliver some passes on frozen ropes, they stalled out in the red zone, forced to kick a field goal, which meant that the Steelers, down by 6, ultimately had another chance to go and win this game, but ultimately didn't get very far. The running joke from this game was if the Packers receivers could catch, it would have been a blowout. Overall, solid Super Bowl, and I put it in B tier. 2012. The anticipation for the rematch between the Patriots and Giants in Super Bowl 46 was exciting, even to the casual fan. 4 years prior, the Giants pulled off the greatest upset in Super Bowl history when they defeated the undefeated Patriots. Although there were new faces on both sides, you still had Belichick and Brady versus Coughlin and Manning. This game got off to a bizarre start. Brady threw the ball away to avoid a sack in the end zone, but it resulted in intentional grounding and thus a safety. Then the Giants went down and scored a touchdown, and boom, they were up 9-0. After that, things slowed down a bit, with the Patriots scratching and clawing their way back into the game. Just like last time, it was not going to be easy for them to move the ball against this Giants defense, but they did manage to take the lead just before halftime. To start the second half, the Patriots marched right down the field for another touchdown to extend their lead to 8. And just when you thought they were going to take control of this game, the Giants began to chip away. First, they got a field goal, then a stop. Then they had a drive where they fumbled and luckily recovered, which eventually led to another field goal. With 4 minutes left in the game, the defining moment for the Patriots offense happened when Wes Welker, who had been so dependable for Tom Brady, dropped the biggest pass of his career. This led to a punt, and down 2 inside their own 10 with 3:46 to go, it was deja vu. Eli Manning had a chance to go drive down the field and win the game versus the Patriots in the Super Bowl. How did he respond to this pressure? He made one of the greatest throws ever. Then they went right down the field and set themselves up to pretty much run the clock all the way down and kick a chip shot to win. But Bradshaw accidentally scored a touchdown with 1 minute to go, which is actually what the Patriots wanted in that moment. The Patriots had one last gasp Hail Mary from the 50, which fell to the turf just inches away from Gronk's hands. That was the ball game. Overall, this was an awesome Super Bowl, and for me, it lands in A tier. 2013. This game was an interesting change of pace. Neither of these teams had been to the Super Bowl since 2001, and it was the Harbaugh brothers facing off as head coaches. The Niners had been developing this roster for years, but they were quite a surprise considering Colin Kaepernick had taken over mid-season for an injured Alex Smith, and he had been one of the most explosive out-of-nowhere players in the NFL. For the Ravens, they had been on the cusp for years, and finally got back to the big game, which was likely their star linebacker Ray Lewis's last game. From the get-go, Baltimore dominated, jumping out to a 21-6 lead at halftime, and then opening the second half, Jacoby Jones returned the kick 109 yards for a touchdown. Jacoby Jones, who also was on the receiving end of their deep bomb touchdown just before halftime, seemed to have sealed the Niners' fate. But then, the weirdest thing happened. The power went out for over half an hour. This is easily the biggest thing people remember about this game. You just never see this kind of thing happen in pro sports, let alone the biggest single sporting event in America. When they resumed, it literally felt like a different game was being played. The Ravens' momentum was completely gone, and the Niners stormed all the way back in heroic fashion. The Kaepernick that Niners fans had gotten used to showed up, especially at the end of this rally where he ran in a touchdown, pulling them to within 2 points. But ultimately they failed the 2-point try. After the Ravens extended their lead to 5, the Niners got one last chance to go and win the game, which seemed highly improbable just an hour earlier. Kaepernick led him right down the field, setting up a 1st and goal with 2 minutes to go, but ultimately, the Ravens held firm. Overall, this was a weird game. It had mostly been boring, with a bizarre power outage, but ultimately had a pretty epic second half with a failed comeback. It's definitely one of the most memorable Super Bowls mostly for the power outage, but for entertainment value, I put it in B tier. 2014. Super Bowl 48 was your ideal matchup on paper. The Broncos, who possessed a record-setting offense led by a revived Peyton Manning, faced off against the Seahawks, who had built one of the greatest modern defenses ever. Well, if it ever felt like a Super Bowl was over after one play, this was it. A snap over the head of Manning ended in a safety, and from that moment, Seattle dominated. This was a total clinic. I remember being at a party and calling it quits after Percy Harvin's big second half return. This 43-8 beatdown will go down as one of the most dominant championship performances ever. And for non-Seahawks fans, this game was really disappointing to watch considering the hype. This one's definitely a D tier Super Bowl. 2015. Super Bowl 49 had a ton of hype. The Seahawks, looking for a repeat, took on the Patriots, who hadn't won a Super Bowl since they were repeat champions in the early 2000s. The fame of certain players like Marshawn Lynch and Russell Wilson had skyrocketed since they won the Super Bowl, and the Patriots were trying to get over their recent Super Bowl woes considering they had lost their last 2 appearances. When the game kicked off, Like many Super Bowls, no one could score to start the game. Even when the Patriots drove all the way to the red zone, the Seahawks picked Brady off, which kept the game scoreless through one quarter. The Seahawks offense was a snooze fest until they finally hit a big play late in the second quarter, and this was really where things began to pick up. Marshawn punched it in for a touchdown. Then Brady answered with a nice touchdown drive with 30 seconds to go. And just when you thought that this was going to be the halftime score, Seattle busted off two massive runs, converted on a deep ball that also had a face mask penalty, and with 6 seconds to go just before halftime, they took the risk of throwing the ball, and it worked. Touchdown. After halftime, it seemed like the Seahawks had taken control. They got a field goal to start the second half, and then picked off Brady for a second time, which set up a touchdown. At this point, they had a 10-point lead, and their defense was stifling Brady and the Patriots till about midway through the fourth quarter. But of course, you can never count out Brady. On a crucial 3rd and long, Edelman made a huge catch to move the chains, and a few plays later, they scored a touchdown. Seattle would go 3 and out, and once again, Brady marched right down the field, slicing and dicing the #1 defense in the league, and they took the lead with 2 minutes to go. Of course, Seattle answered with a drive down to the goal line, which was set up by that circus catch, seemingly ending the game. Their Super Bowl victory felt inevitable, as all they had to do was hand the ball off to Marshawn Lynch. But they didn't. The energy of this game was off the charts. A back and forth affair, trash talk, super physical, a plot twist ending of epic proportion. This game had everything. It's truly one of the greatest Super Bowls ever, and it's certainly one of the most memorable. It lands in S tier. 2016. Super Bowl 50 was an awesome matchup on paper. The 15-1 Panthers were led by MVP Cam Newton, who had just had one of the most dominant single seasons ever. And they were playing the Broncos, who still had Peyton Manning, but they had completely changed their team identity. In the process of Manning's arm completely falling apart, they had become a defensively dominant team. And this proved to be critically important in this game. Early on, the Broncos jumped out to an early lead. Von Miller made his presence felt immediately with a strip sack that led to a touchdown, with 6 minutes to go in the first quarter. The Panthers did answer with a touchdown, but for the most part, the first half was a pretty boring one. Not a lot of big plays, a whole lot of punts, and ultimately, the Broncos led 13-7 at halftime. And to be honest, the second half was much of the same. The Panthers missed a long field goal to start the second half, and the Broncos kept adding field goals. And ultimately, Von Miller and this defense was too much for Cam Newton and the Panthers. Carolina did have one last chance down 6 with 4 minutes left to go, but a second strip sack and the famous "Cam, what are you doing" moment happened. This led to a touchdown, and that was all she wrote. Overall, this was an awesome performance by the Broncos defense, but as a non-Broncos fan, it was a pretty boring Super Bowl. This one lands in C tier. 2017. Super Bowl 51 saw the evil empire back once again, this time facing off against the high-octane Falcons with MVP Matt Ryan. The contest was scoreless through 1, but once the Falcons broke through, the floodgates opened. They scored 2 touchdowns, while the Patriots couldn't get anything going. Then, the pick 6 happened. The pick 6 before halftime with Brady diving and missing the tackle felt like the photo that was going to represent the Super Bowl. Up 3 scores at halftime, the Falcons continued their dominance in the third quarter, marching down and scoring another touchdown to go up 28-3. At this point, the game felt like it was going to be like the Seahawks-Broncos Super Bowl. But instead, we witnessed the most insane comeback in NFL history. The Patriots rallied with a touchdown, forced a 3 and out, then got a field goal, then recovered a fumble immediately, which led to another touchdown. Now, with the game within a touchdown, it was officially panic time for Atlanta. But they did put together a solid drive with that amazing Julio Jones catch that seemed to be the saving grace, at least setting them up for a field goal. But a shocking turn of events led them out of field goal range, which gave the Patriots a chance to tie, which they did, sending the game to overtime. The Patriots got the ball first, went right down the field, and scored the game-winning touchdown, capping off the craziest and most epic comeback in Super Bowl history. No doubt about it. This one lands in S tier. 2018. Super Bowl 52 was a familiar sight. The Patriots once again made it to the big dance, this time facing off against the Eagles, who were playing with their backup quarterback Nick Foles. The Patriots were huge favorites due to this, but rather quickly, it appeared that this backup was their worst nightmare. A series of notable moments happened, including a Foles bombed Alshon Jeffrey, a rare mishap on a short field goal, and then a long Eagles touchdown drive that saw them storm out to a 15-3 lead to begin the game. The Patriots did grind their way back to within 3 with 2 minutes left before halftime, but Philly responded in an epic way. They had a series of huge plays that took them all the way to the goal line, but they were stuffed on 1st, 2nd, and 3rd down. With the ball on the 1.5-yard line, just moments before halftime, the Eagles made the ballsy decision to go for it, and then they shocked the world. Not only did the Philly special become one of the most iconic play calls ever, but it was also epic because the Patriots tried their own version earlier in the game and it didn't work. The second half became a fireworks show. The Patriots began with a touchdown. Then the Eagles responded with their own touchdown, off a perfect pass by Nick Foles. Once again, the Patriots scored a touchdown. The Eagles would go get a field goal, and the Patriots scored another touchdown. By this point, both offenses seemed unstoppable. And with 10 minutes to go, Foles responded again with an amazing drive, which included a ballsy 4th and 1 in their own territory that they barely converted. And it paid off as they got another touchdown. But after a failed 2-point try, Brady was in yet another familiar moment. He had 2 minutes to go and try and win this game. But instead of what usually happened, he was strip sacked, and it was recovered by Philly. After being stopped to a field goal, the Patriots somehow managed to get one more shot. But on the Hail Mary, it fell incomplete. Ball game. Brady threw for over 500 yards. Foles played like an MVP. From ballsy play calls to huge plays, this one had it all, and is truly an S-tier Super Bowl. 2019. For the 4th time in 5 years, the Patriots are here again, this time versus the LA Rams, who had been resurrected by Sean McVay. Now, for all the high-flying action of the previous Super Bowl, this one had none of that. The game was basically a punt-off. So many punts. In fact, one of the comments from the highlight video said this, quote, "No joke, this was the best punter battle of all time." With a 3-0 score at half, this one was a snooze fest. The Rams offense was pretty abysmal throughout the game. They did manage to give themselves 2 chances for a touchdown, but Brandon Cooks couldn't come down with the ball on both occasions. It wasn't until the 4th quarter that we finally saw a touchdown by the Patriots. Then, with 4 minutes to go, Stephon Gilmore made a crucial interception that eventually led to the game-sealing field goal. Overall, this was a boring game with very few exciting moments. Although it was the lowest scoring Super Bowl ever, at least it was pretty close till the end. I put it in C tier. 2020. Finally, we saw fresh blood. The Chiefs, with their young superstar Patrick Mahomes, versus the 49ers, who had a dominant offense led by their diverse run game and a top 10 defense. To start things off, we had a nice back and forth. The Niners struck first, then the Chiefs answered twice. Then the Niners tied things up at 10, and almost had more points if it weren't for an offensive pass interference call on Kittle just before halftime. The start of the second was when the Niners began to take control. They got 3 points, picked off Mahomes, and then scored a touchdown to give them a 10-point lead. And then after Mahomes threw an early 4th quarter interception, this felt like the game was close to over. But the Niners couldn't capitalize. They went 3 and out. And then Mahomes, faced with a 3rd and 15 with 7 minutes to go, made his first ever legendary Super Bowl moment. He completed a bomb to Tyreek Hill to keep the game alive. This eventually led to a touchdown, and after the Niners immediately punted again, Mahomes added some more magic with a beautiful throw to Watkins that set up another touchdown, which gave the Chiefs the lead with 2:39 to go. Once again, the Niners couldn't do anything offensively, turning the ball over in their own territory. Then, the Chiefs delivered the dagger. This game will be remembered as the last normal event of 2020. I go back and forth, I don't know if I should put it in A or B tier. I think I'm going to put it in B tier. 2021. Super Bowl 55 saw the Chiefs looking to repeat versus who else? Tom Brady with his new team. But this was officially a weird game. There was low attendance numbers due to the pandemic, which made the energy feel off. After a slow start, we got our first surreal moment, seeing Brady connect with Gronk for the game's first touchdown. And they did it again for a second time in the second quarter. For the Chiefs, this game quickly turned into a nightmare. They couldn't get anything going offensively, and the Bucs continued to make plays. And after catching the Chiefs off guard and getting a massive PI call just before halftime, Tampa Bay scored another touchdown to go into halftime up 21-6. After one more Bucs touchdown in the third quarter, this game was pretty much over. What I remember most about this game was Mahomes running for his life and almost making insane throws, but just not quite getting the completion. The image of Winfield throwing up the deuces in Tyreek's face was the most iconic moment of this game. Overall, a dominant defensive performance by the Bucs, and a cool moment for Brady. But for the casual fan, this was pretty boring and over by the third quarter. For entertainment value, this blowout goes in D tier. 2022. This was perhaps the most unexpected matchup in recent memory. After a few years, the Rams returned with a new quarterback, Matt Stafford, to face off against the shocking Bengals, who had upset the Chiefs in Arrowhead in the AFC Championship. The first big thing to happen was Stafford throwing a touchdown to OBJ, who wasn't even on the team until late in the season. After a few punts, Joe Burrow hit Chase on a sweet deep bomb that ended in 3 points. Once again, the Rams carved up the Bengals defense, and they went and got another touchdown, which gave them a 10-point lead after a failed PAT. Needing a score desperately, the Bengals answered with a beautiful drive and a trick play pitch pass touchdown from Mixon to Higgins. Unfortunately, OBJ would tear his ACL just before halftime. The beginning of the second half was quite a shift in momentum. The Bengals caught a major break on a surprise deep ball to start the third quarter that gave them an instant touchdown. On the play, Higgins got away with grabbing Ramsey's face mask. Then, immediately, Stafford threw a pick, and the Bengals got a field goal out of it. Seemingly out of nowhere, the Bengals were up by a full touchdown. Then both teams sort of stalled out for a while. The Rams managed to get at least a field goal, but started punting a lot, and Burrow just could not escape the pressure. Then, late in the game, down by 4, finally the Rams did what they had done all season. Stafford basically got the ball to Kupp every play, and after a big PI that set them up at the goal line, Kupp caught the go-ahead touchdown. With one last chance, the Bengals had a 4th and 1 they needed to convert from the 50, and ultimately, Aaron Donald made the game-sealing play. This was a bit of an ugly game, but it did have some solid moments and came down to the wire. For how much it entertained me, I put it as a solid B-tier Super Bowl. 2023. We got a really cool matchup for Super Bowl 57. It featured two franchises that had somewhat recently played in a Super Bowl, with the Chiefs maintaining the same coach and quarterback, while the Eagles had a new coach and quarterback. Right away, there were fireworks by both sides with 2 opening touchdown drives. After a missed field goal by the Chiefs, the Eagles answered with a Hurts bomb to A.J. Brown for a huge touchdown to start the second quarter. Hurts was playing incredibly, but then he had that devastating fumble, which was scooped and scored to tie things up. As bad as that was, Hurts did bounce back from that. He led a touchdown drive with crucial plays, including his 4th down run and his rushing touchdown to put them up by 7. Right before half, Mahomes got ankle tackled on 3rd down and was clearly banged up as he limped off the field, and the Eagles answered again immediately, getting a field goal to give them a 10-point lead at halftime. To start the second half, the Chiefs got a much-needed touchdown, and even though the Eagles continued to make big plays, they couldn't quite get in the end zone. And eventually, after another Chiefs touchdown drive, they took the lead. In the fourth quarter, the Eagles were forced to punt, and this ended up being one of the biggest plays of the game, as Kadarius Toney had a massive punt return that set up a Chiefs touchdown. With 8 minutes to go, Hurts and the Eagles needed a big-time drive to go and tie things up, and that's just what they did. After a huge catch by Smith, they scored a touchdown. Then, Hurts ran in the critical 2-point conversion to tie things up with 5 minutes to go. With a chance to go win the game, Mahomes orchestrated yet another beautiful drive, running and throwing. And then, the controversial moment happened. On 3rd and 8, the Eagles were called on a defensive holding penalty that pretty much ended the game. It was a pretty tough call in the moment, Overall, this was an amazing game, with an incredible back and forth. Even though the ending was a bit of a buzzkill, this one still lands in S tier. Now, finally, 2024. For this Super Bowl, we got a rematch. The Chiefs versus the Niners. This time around, the Niners had a new quarterback leading the charge in Brock Purdy. And for the Chiefs, this was their chance to repeat and officially put Mahomes in the GOAT conversation. The beginning was a stalemate, with both teams going scoreless in the first quarter. But Jake Moody did hit a long field goal to begin the second. Then, after a brutal fumble in the red zone by the Chiefs, the Niners eventually went on a touchdown drive to give them a 10-0 lead. And just before halftime, the Chiefs managed to get a field goal to make it 10-3. To begin the second half, it was more of the stalemate until the Chiefs grinded out a field goal with 4 minutes left in the third quarter. Then, after the Niners punted, a huge, game-breaking play happened. The Chiefs were forced to punt, but the Niners punt returner muffed the punt, which set up an easy Chiefs touchdown. Luckily, the Niners offense finally got things going again and answered with a touchdown drive. But they did have the PAT blocked, which was huge because it meant the game was still within 3 points. The Chiefs answered with a field goal, then the Niners set up a field goal, which Moody made again, and then when they needed it the most, Mahomes made big plays and set up the Chiefs for the chip shot to send the game into overtime. In overtime, the Niners got the ball first, and like we saw throughout the game, they drove down the field, but stalled out and settled for a field goal, which allowed Mahomes to crush their soul with a touchdown drive. Ball game. This was an ugly heavyweight fight that picked up steam in the second half. Each team grinded out every yard. Kickers were clutch. There was overtime. Mahomes cemented himself as one of the GOATs. And overall, this game belongs in A tier.
A little shovel, looking for an edge, gets it, Saquon Barkley, first down, Barkley! Oh!